But that would not last long, would it? By 54, Washington had made his venture from the Virginia colony all the way out into the Western Territory, of which I remember the adventure. For I was coming back on it. The colony had sent me out to Logstown, just near Pittsburgh, what you call Pittsburgh. For me, it's Fort Pitt. It sent me to Logstown, where there was a settlement of Oneida. The Shawnee, the Seneca were all there as well. So there were almost 2,000 natives there. And having an interest in trade with the natives, it sent me out to create a treaty with them. On my way back, I ran into Half King, who was a Seneca chief, and Mr. James Croghan, who is also an Indian trader, who had been hired on by this upstart, a young colonel by the name of Washington, to venture out and discover what the French were doing on the western frontier. As I made my way back, I conversed with Croghan and Half King, and then made my way back home, only to find out news later on that this Washington fellow was the whole purpose behind the French and Indian War. He was the one who started the whole affair. He allowed his natives to attack a group of French and massacre them. Jumonville was the French officer's name, and the French would not forgive him for it. So here we are, the French and Indian War, of which I've been made a captain in the militia during the French and Indian War. You may know that many of the natives had wandered into our area. Not wandered, they were purposeful about it, let's be honest. Had managed to make their way on raiding parties into our environs here. But there was a threat on my own life. My own life was threatened. News had made it to me that if they could make it all the way to Harris's Ferry, they would kill me, as an example. For I was in charge of the settlement. So we of course saddled up all of our men, 50 of them, and started out to see if we could find these savages, of which we were ambushed. 4 men dead outright. I watched a man being killed off of his horse as we were traversing across the Susquehanna River to get away. There he is floating down the river. My own horse shot out from under me. It took me almost a full 2 weeks to get back home, where I had to avoid being captured or caught by this band of rogue Indians. The Philadelphia newspaper announced that they were quite certain, since I had not arrived back home, that I was indeed dead. I proved them wrong, which is something well done to be proved. Yes. So fellows like Sturgeon and Armstrong and well, there's a Gilbraith. There's a large number. I can show you the number here in this book of the men who would sign up and go off to battle. You can look at it yourself when we get a chance. These men, all good citizens, all taxpayers, all good British subjects. For that's what we were. We were British subjects in a British colony here in Pennsylvania. And our task was to protect the frontier. For you see, if the frontier had been invaded, they could make their way all the way into the settlements of Lancaster or Reading or Philadelphia. That was not allowed. Franklin, Mr. Franklin, you know the fellow? I see the picture. Right. I see your smile. The good Dr. Franklin came out here to the frontier and established where the forts might be here upon the frontier, so that all the settlements, this is a map of the colony, so he established a ring of forts to protect all of the settlements here from Philadelphia, Lancaster, Reading, all the way out here to the Susquehanna River, a ring of forts, all the way from the Maryland line, all the way around up in toward the Delaware. So you see, at any given moment, these natives would be siding with the opposition, or that they would want something. There were moments when the natives would come to my house for trade. I had a license to trade, and so it was quite popular to do so, and appropriate for them. I just want to be aware of my time. Do you know, in jest, do you know when a preacher pulls out his watch? Do you know what that means?
We got 31 minutes.
No, it means absolutely nothing. through many a Presbyterian sermon. Mr. Elder is my good friend. Reverend Elder is my good friend. He's heard me make that joke. So we've got this ring of forts that would protect us. And those of us who live in the frontier, we join the militia and we man these forts. And we range the mountains that are around us here. We whether it's horseback or on foot, we walk and see if there's signs of motion or movement by natives all around. And by natives, I mean Delaware, Lenni Lenape, Onondaga, Seneca, Iroquois, Shawnee, the list goes on. So we have a great number of natives, many of which are friendly, until you get up into the Mohawk. The Mohawk are not as friendly. And of course the Huron have sided with the French. So as we work our way through the French and Indian War and make our way into 1757, Fort Duquesne is destroyed and Fort Pitt is established by the British, of which the British land 400 Highlanders in Philadelphia. Have you seen the Highlanders with their kilts? I suggest the ladies look the other direction. They are not men of modesty. So these men in kilts, Highlanders, they were marched all the way out to Pittsburgh. Guess where they crossed the river? They crossed the Susquehanna at Harris's Ferry. The men walked across the river. All of the baggage, all the officers, all the horses, all the cannon. I carried all of that material across on my flat bottom boats across the river. And if I can be honest with you, I made a small fortune. Once the frontier was open, men and their families continued to flow from the settlements into the western frontier, establishing homesteads that had been granted through treaties. Not always in safe manner, by the way. Some of the Indians were still offended by the walking treaty that had happened. Some offended by the very fact that white men would be making their way into their hunting grounds or into their territories. And so still massacres exist well into the 1760s with Pontiac's rebellion. It is a nasty business. But eventually, the natives will be pushed. But you see, during the Great War, the War for Independency, Mr. Washington in '79 contracts with General Sullivan and 5,000 American troops to go into the northern colony of Pennsylvania, the southern colony of New York, and in effect decimate the Indians who are living there. For they had sided with the British, you see. By the time we get to the American Revolution, many of these Indians are siding now with the British. Where you see the British had made them a promise that if they side with them, that they would stop expansion into the western frontier, which was not true. It was a lie. There were many lies being told to the natives, by the way. Those of us who live here on the frontier have to live with those lies, by the way. Where they come to our houses and they knock on our doors and say, what about this? What about the promise made to us? And yet, promises are broken. Seems to be a steady chain of treaties and broken promises with our brethren. So, in an attempt to make peace, they moved west, the natives, and we continued to establish conversation back and forth with them. As we did, I asked for proper businessmen, tradesmen, coopers, shoemakers, leather workers, and tanners, all sorts of men to come from Philadelphia, from Lancaster, from Reading, and come and settle in Harris's Ferry so that we might make it a proper town. In the 1750s, we have about 500. By the time we get to the 1780s, there's almost a full 2,000 living here. And we are truly a fine settlement on both. Now, I include both sides of the Susquehanna River when I say that, for the Harris's Ferry area isn't that large. And so we go all the way to the foot of Peters Mountain, all the way down into what is now Middletown, and then we span both sides of the river I have almost 2,000 acres myself on both sides of the river that I've acquired over the years. And some of which I now can use. I had land at 600 acres north of here on the western shore of the Susquehanna, which was near a Seneca village, and the Seneca would not allow me to use the land. Their chief went down to Philadelphia and argued against the use of the land. That Harris is trying to build a house on his land up there, and the government stopped me. They said, we have a treaty, you cannot, so I had to abandon the project. So there was a Seneca village up there, there's a Shawnee village down on the western shore of the river, downriver, just not a few miles. Rather large villages, as a matter of fact. My father ran into issues with the natives. He had the license to trade initially and found himself in a situation where if you cut off their liquor, you can find yourself in great danger. The story is told that he was tied to a tree, and they were going to burn him to death if he did not open the storehouse for more liquor to be released. And his servant Hercules came along and released him with the help of a few sober Indians, for they had already had their fill. Hercules was, upon my father's death, Hercules was released and given his freedom, that he might live his own life as a free African. My father had 5 Africans. I have 6 myself, which is the most of any one person here on the frontier in the Harris's Ferry. But I assure you that it's not they are not the only Negroes living here. There are others. I don't remember if Sturgeon had any Negroes. He may have had one. I'd have to look. I'd have to think. But I don't recall. But slavery exists. Servitude. We purchase them down in Philadelphia and bring them here to work for us. Having the ferry, having all the acreage and all the farming that I'm doing, I needed the help, and so it's important to have them here. I have three women and 3 men who work for me, who are servants. It's my intention upon my last will that I might release them all and give them their freedom. So I think it's a good idea. We are well past, once we get into the 1780s, we were well past the rules and laws of trade for human cargo. We've outlawed it. Those who are born in slavery remain in slavery, but Negroes cannot be sold any longer. And so they must be maintained at your household. So all of those limitations, all of those rules have now been outlawed. And so I see the writing is on the wall that eventually, I think eventually, servitude here in the colony might disappear. I also have 2 indentures. I have 2 young Irish girls who are indentured to my wife. They work specifically with her, learning all sorts of things. The one indenture is for 5 years, the other is for 7. Of course, you understand indenture, do you not? Yes? No? You know? Yeah. So indenture, so we paid her trip over. We paid for her trip. And because of that, then she owes us a certain number of years of work so that she could pay off the debt. Once the debt's paid off, she's free to go, free to do whatever she would like, to live her own life, to marry, to start her own household, do whatever she may like. So, but our job was to pay the debt. Her job is to pay the debt back. Makes sense, right? So, one of the things that we've established here on the frontier, and your family members can tell you just as well as I can of this fact, we have found ourselves in need of education. So we've found ourselves some tutors, some teachers to come in from Philadelphia and to educate our children. I established a school in 1785 in my own house, the Harrisburg Academy, we call it. That it might be a place for teaching children For those who can afford the small amount we charge, they can come and have their children taught by a proper teacher. All of the things that need to be done, reading, writing, ciphering, all of those things are important. I found myself, as a businessman, I found it most important to educate my Negroes, so they also know how to read and write and cipher. For my job oftentimes is to go to Philadelphia to make sure that all of our goods are being shipped properly and to make sure our arrangements with shipping is cared for and all of my payments are made. And so I must leave behind my Negroes to care for my business. It makes sense. And so I educated them that they might be able to care for things while I'm gone in my absence. It was a reality on the frontier. And I saw nothing dangerous about it. So better to have one educated, have an individual under your care to be educated so that they can properly care for your business. But there was a fine day not long ago. I was in Philadelphia in June of '76. I was a representative there in the Pennsylvania government. And so I went down in June of '76. They had called the Congress together, the Pennsylvania Congress together, and we were in the midst of debating whether we should agree with independency or not. I must inform you that I voted against independence at that meeting in June of '76. Our delegation, ruled by Mr. Franklin, as well as several others, our delegation to the Continental Congress was given direction to vote against independence. Mr. Franklin won the day, by the way. Our delegation voted for independence. But my father and mother were born in Yorkshire, England. They came over in 98, 1698, to Philadelphia. And so I saw myself as a good English citizen. The taxes were not burdensome to us. The king never bothered me. I've never seen a British soldier walk up and down my street, nor shall I ever, I would imagine. You see, we saw the problem as a problem of some upstarts up in Boston. They call themselves the Sons of Liberty. Do you know? Yes, you're familiar. That was all the way back in '75. And in April of '75, the British, who had every right to march their way out and retrieve a storehouse of munitions in Concord, found themselves on the green at Lexington facing a bunch of militiamen in '75. And they say that there was a single shot that rang out that started the whole mess, dead laying upon the ground. And here we are. Here we were then at war with the most powerful nation in the world, the largest navy in the world, largest army in the world. I was against it. But once independence was declared, the fellow from Virginia, Jefferson, are you familiar with that name? Yes. The young man from Virginia was given the order to write the Declaration. He had done some work with the Virginia Declaration, and so he wrote out this long set of issues. I don't know if many people know the start of this, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, so on and so on, those being life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We know all of that, right? But if you ever get a chance to read the entirety of the document, which I did, I received it in the Gazette, the Pennsylvania Gazette published the entirety of the document, and I received it about 10 days after it had been announced that its signature had taken place on July the 2nd. And I received it by courier. And I sat upon my front porch with my pipe and read the entirety of the document, and I realized that, one, that Jefferson had done a good job. He was not alone, obviously. Do you know all five who were with him, all five of the writers of the Declaration? Adams, right? Franklin, Mr. Franklin, Mr. Livingston, removed himself from the process of being president. He left himself out of the process. So, it probably should have been Sturgeon. Stewart. So there were 5 altogether, but they gave Jefferson, because he was a Virginian, Virginia being one of the largest colonies. But some of the other things, all of the grievances of the colonies are written out in the Declaration, of which you probably have never fully learned. We don't do an excellent job of teaching this through our posterity. But the arguments against the king is that he has done things that are heinously objective. He's brought in troops, armed troops. He has controlled where judges shall sit, and all the records shall be kept. None of those places are in places of convenience, as it says here. And they have made it so that if you commit a crime here in the colony, you should be shipped to England. That we cannot try anyone here on this side of the ocean. By the time you get to England, my heavens, the whole business is forgotten. He's abolished the free system of English laws. He's taken away our charters, abolished our most valuable laws, and altered our fundamental form of government here in the colony. We are being treated very much like servants. He suspended our legislatures, abdicated government, plundered our seas, ravaged our coast, burnt our towns, destroyed the lives of our people. I like this line. This one's affected us here on the frontier. He has excited domestic insurrections among us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontier the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sections, sexes, and conditions. In other words, he's hired Indians to fight against us. I've been an Indian fighter. I assure you, there's no good in it. There's none whatsoever. So here we are, a free country. We've gone from colonies to states in my lifetime. I've seen the Constitution written and signed, and in so doing, they established this idea of a presidency. You remember that upstart I talked about? Well, he's now president, that Washington fellow, of which I have great admiration now. Did you see what he did during the American Revolution? With so little to work with, we had great victory. He did not do it alone, I assure you, but he was the fellow given charge of the whole mess, and he did well. So Mr. Washington is now president, and I find myself in a position of wealth here upon the Susquehanna. When the American Revolution broke out in '76, the Declaration was signed. I read the Declaration upon my front porch and realized that I should throw my weight in with the cause. I had Jack saddle up my horse at 3 a.m. in the morning, and with 3,000 pounds of ready money that I had at the house, I delivered it to Philadelphia the next day to the Continental Congress to show my sign of support. Both of my sons had already signed up, you see. John and David both had signed up with Thompson's battalion, and they were already in Canada and back. So we were already well deep into it. And so then I threw my own weight in and became a colonel in the 13th Pennsylvania Battalion. It has been a good life. I find myself here in 1791 with the establishment of Dauphin County. Prior to 1785, this was Lancaster County all the way to the Susquehanna River. I was tired of going to Lancaster City for all of my court proceedings and land deals that I had to have signatures for. And so we needed our own county here. And I had donated 30 acres for the county seat in the place of government. So I petitioned that the name of the town would be called after my father, would be called Harrisburg. For my father had received the charter from Mr. Penn, and Harris was the first family here. I was the first child born upon the Susquehanna. and 27. So, at least first child we know of. So, I saw that my father's name should be upon the seal of the town. You can find on every map, it says Harris's Ferry. That's what everyone knows us by. There's a fellow, because we named the county Dauphin after the Dauphin, the son of King Louis, for their involvement during the French and Indian War. There was a fellow who thought that we should name the seat of government for Dauphin County, we should name it after the king himself, and we should name it Louisburg. I assure you, I told them that over my dead body shall I call it anything other than Harrisburg. And I won the day. So by 1791, everything had been settled. I had done all the work that I had needed to do, and then I became ill. And within 2 weeks, I closed my eyes for the very last time. In August of 1791. And lay here in repose, both of my wives having preceded me in death. There we have it. John Harris, at your service. So all that being said, let us open with questions that you might have. Understanding that I shall entertain questions as Mr. Harris first,